Welcome back to Accessible Gourmet. Today we're making a semi-traditional Thanksgiving dinner. There are a couple of things that we're going to make the day ahead, just so it's not so overwhelming the day of. Let's start with the stuffing. We're going to need 1 loaf of day-old white or sourdough bread. I'm using sourdough because that's what I had. We're going to just chop this up into cubes, put it on a parchment-lined baking sheet, and toast it in the oven at 300 for 20 minutes. We're also going to need 2 cups of celery. I use the stems and the leaves because the leaves add another dimension of flavor to your dish. We're also going to need 1 bulb of fennel. Chop this up and put it in a bowl with the celery. And 1 whole yellow onion, just in a medium dice as well. We're also going to need mushrooms. If you're vegetarian, you could leave out the sausage in this and just use the mushrooms. It would be just as delicious because the mushrooms add a meatiness that's just inherent to portobello mushrooms. We're also going to need a tablespoon of oregano, a tablespoon of thyme, as well as a tablespoon of rosemary and sage. This we're just going to finely mince and set aside because that goes in after. So over medium heat, we're going to heat up 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And to this, we're going to add our onion, celery, and fennel and saute this for 5 minutes until it softens. And then dump this out into a large bowl. In the same pan, we're going to add our portobello mushrooms. And we're going to saute these until they're browned and all the liquid has evaporated out of the mushrooms. Pour this in the same bowl as your other vegetables. And again, in the same pan, we're going to add our 1 pound of ground pork. Again, if you're vegetarian, you can leave this step out. You want to just break it up as it cooks so it forms nice small pieces. When this is cooked through, pour this in the same bowl. And then to the pan, we're going to add 1½ cups of chicken stock and 3 tablespoons of cognac and scrape up anything that's left on the bottom of the pan. We're going to let this simmer for about 5 minutes or until the alcohol cooks off, and then pour this over our stuffing mixture. We're going to add in our herbs, mix this together. And finally add in all of our toasted bread cubes. Just stir until everything is coated and well combined. And then we're going to butter a 9x13 casserole, pour all of our stuffing in it, cover it in saran wrap, and let it sit in the fridge for 6 hours or overnight. Next, we're going to work on our cranberry sauce because that can be served cold or at room temperature. We need to zest 1 orange. It helps if you take off the sticker, although those are actually edible. So we need the zest of 1 orange as well as the juice. So over the stove, we're going to heat up 1 cup of water to 1 cup of sugar and stir that until all the sugar is melted. Then we're going to add 16 ounces of cranberries, a pinch of salt. I know this sounds weird, but it adds flavor, as well as our juice and our zest. And we're going to let this simmer until the cranberries burst open and it becomes jammy. Next up is our port wine reduction. So we're going to add half a bottle of port wine, as well as 2 tablespoons of dried shallots. And we're going to simmer this over the stove for about an hour and a half or until it reduces. Now we're working on the rub for our duck breasts. For this we need a 1/4 teaspoon of thyme, a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, as well as the zest of another orange, and a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar. Mix this up. Now onto our duck breasts. I'm halving these because the whole duck breast is a little large, and I think the half is a perfect serving. So we want to rub our dry rub, semi-dry rub, all over our duck breasts, making sure to get it on the skin side as well as the meat side, and really rub this in because you want these flavors to saturate into the duck. Then we're going to put these on a plate, cover them with plastic, and put them in the fridge overnight. Now that our cranberry sauce is ready, we're going to put this in a container, let it cool to room temperature, cover, and put this in the fridge and let it sit overnight as well. Now back to our port wine reduction. We're going to strain out any of the shallots. We're going to add 1/2 cup of unsalted broth. I'm using chicken broth here. And we're going to let this simmer for another 15 minutes and let it reduce. And then we're going to pour it into a container and also put this in the fridge overnight. So Thanksgiving Day, take out your stuffing and bring it to room temperature. We're going to cover it with foil and bake it in the oven at 375 for ½ an hour, along with 6 pieces of sliced bacon that we're going to need for our Brussels sprouts. So take a pound of Brussels sprouts, chop off the ends and cut these in half. Put them in a bowl, season with salt and pepper and just a little bit of olive oil because we're going to utilize the bacon fat that's left on the sheet pan. We need a ½ cup of dried cranberries, and we're going to rehydrate them in some boiling water. And we also need to toast 1 cup of pecans. When the bacon is done, pull it off to a paper-lined plate and let it drain. And then we're going to dump all of our Brussels sprouts onto the same parchment and place them face side down. And we're going to cook these in the oven for another 20 minutes so they roast. We're also going to take the foil off of the stuffing and let that crisp up. 20 minutes before you're ready to cook your duck, take it out of the fridge, and we're going to put it on some paper towels and pat off any of the excess moisture that's on there, because that's going to keep it from crisping. We're also going to take a sharp knife or an X-Acto like I'm using here and score the fat and skin of the duck so that it renders when it cooks in the pan. We want to start the duck breasts in a cold pan. If we put this in a hot pan, the fat would immediately sear and none of the fat would render, which we want it to, because you want that skin to be nice and crispy. So we're going to let this come up to temperature, and while that's crisping, we're going to take 2 russet potatoes, cut off the ends, peel them, and then we're going to chop them into 2-inch slices for our fondant potatoes. So over medium heat, heat up 1/2 tablespoon of olive oil, place down our potatoes, and let these cook for 5 minutes or until they're golden. I'm removing 2 of the duck breasts because they're a little thinner than the other 2. We want the internal temperature to be at least 130. Back to our potatoes. We're going to flip these over. Then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of butter, 3 sprigs of thyme, 2 sliced garlic cloves, and a 1/2 cup of chicken broth. We're going to let this simmer for 5 minutes and then put them in a 450-degree oven for half of an hour. Now moving on to our green beans. We're going to heat some oil in a separate pan, throw in a pound of green beans and a pinch of chili flakes, and we're going to let these blister a little bit. Then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of minced garlic and just let this cook until the beans are done. They should take about 5 to 8 minutes. Now that the Brussels sprouts are done, we're going to put them in a bowl, add our chopped up bacon, our rehydrated and drained cranberries, as well as our toasted pecans. Then we're going to add a drizzle of balsamic vinegar, stirred, and that dish is done. Back to our duck breasts. Skins, I like to cut these skin side down just so it doesn't tear the skin. You don't have to slice them. I just think the presentation is a lot prettier when you slice them, but you can definitely leave these whole. Then we're going to drizzle it with our warmed up port wine reduction, and this dish is complete as well. And there it is, my unconventional or semi-traditional Thanksgiving dinner for 2 since we're staying in. We have our duck, we have our Brussels sprouts, we have our delicious fondant potatoes, as well as our cranberry sauce. I forgot the green beans. And my favorite dish, stuffing. But the green beans were great too. Oh, one last thing. I'm doing a cranberry mimosa. I have some frozen cranberries. I'm adding 2 parts of Prosecco or champagne if you're extra fancy, and 1 part of cranberry juice. And that's a cranberry mimosa. Cheers, everybody. I hope you guys had a happy, safe, and wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, click the like button. If you loved it, subscribe and click the notification bell because I put out new videos every week.